Yeah, good day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole with another video. Today I'm going to talk about why does my axe handle come loose. I'm sure that if you own a axe with a wooden handle, at one time or another you may find it comes loose. With a lot of the more expensive brands, and we've got a Grand Force Brux over there, Husqvarna splitting sledge axe, a still splitting axe, and the other three here a cyclone. So these three over here have never come loose, but unfortunately every one of these cyclones have come loose. Okay, why do they come loose? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main two reasons that they come loose. The first reason is they're made in a factory. The lower cost ones, like the cyclones, have an operator that doesn't take the time and effort to dress the handle properly. So the fitment's a little bit sloppy and it's not really tight. Slams a wedge in it. And that's one reason. The second reason is that the timber is not dried properly in the first place. You've got radial shrinkage, tangential shrinkage, longitudinal shrinkage. We'll put a slide up there, two slides of shrinkage. First slide will illustrate radial shrinkage, tangential shrinkage, and longitudinal, so you'll be able to see which way the shrinkage is with the grain and the percentage. The second slide goes into a little bit of detail about that shrinkage. So if the manufacturer, when they manufacture the handle, it should be dried properly so that it has shrunk, or you heat it up, whether it's in an autoclave, you could put it in an autoclave to dry. It should be dry. Because if it's got too much moisture in it and you get a long hot summer or in the warmer weather, it'll shrink. If you've got the combination of very poor workmanship, that the handle wasn't put in the axe or the splitting maul or the block splitter, it wasn't put in there very tight, and it was put in there with too much moisture, that'll come loose, guaranteed. However, generally speaking, that when you buy the more upmarket brands, they will make sure that the handles are dried to the proper percentage of moisture, which is probably around about 8 to 12% of moisture in it, so that it shouldn't lose any more moisture. And a lot of times the handles are sealed with linseed oil or even lacquer, keeps the moisture in and stops them from drying out any further. But generally speaking, if the moisture's been removed to a low level of 8 to 12%, the shrinkage of the wood would be at its minimal. So therefore, it's very unlikely that that will come loose. But with age, axe handles can come loose. There is one remedy I found that works. You can tap the axe head or the maul, tap it down a little bit more and drive the wedge in a little bit. This is one remedy that can work, and sometimes that's all it's needed. Another remedy that can work, and it can last a couple of months, is that you can soak it in a bucket of water overnight. Water gets into that axe head where the handle is, it'll start to swell up again and it will come tight. And it might last for a couple of months. So if you've had an extremely hot summer, and we have, been one of the hottest summers. The other thing, these live inside a shipping container, so that probably gets in excess of 45, 50 degrees in there. So this could actually help shrink the handles as well. So yeah, it's not a bad idea to keep them in a cool place rather than a hot place. So there are a couple of tips on wooden handles. And as I said, usually and generally speaking, the more upmarket ones, and especially Grants 4's Brucks, I know that they got a special drying treatment for those to make sure that they remove as much moisture as possible out of them. Plus the other thing is that where they put the wedge in there, and we can sort of briefly look at that, the wood sticks above the maul and it's slightly flared open and it's got a little small wedge in there. Most likely that won't come loose. The Husqvarna splitting axe has a wedge in the middle and a steel wedge in there. Now typically the other thing, the eye of the axe maul should be slightly larger at the opening and at the end, because if it's slightly larger it can lock the head in. You can see where the wood is, it's got a taper there. If you've got a little bit of a taper on your wood like that, that should be able to lock it in pretty tight. And see, they grind this off flush. I always prefer that if you've got a little bit of wood on top with the wedge in there, it can flare the wood over a little bit. And if the wood's flared over, the wood's up 3-4 millimeters and it's flared open a little bit, generally locks the axe in pretty tight. What I mean by that is that this came loose on me, all right? So what I did was clean up the bottom a little bit, knocked it on a little bit more, got the wedge out, so I removed the whole handle and everything else, and knocked it back in and hit the wedge back in as hard as I could. And yeah, that flared open a little bit. Not much, a little bit, but you don't need much. If the flare of the wood just flares, even if it's a 0.5 millimetre, flares out a 0.5 millimetre either side, that's enough to really hold the axe or the maul head in there. But when you grind off the top of the wood flush with the axe, you don't get that flare, which is a Grant 4's Brucks. They do it that way, and that's the way that I prefer to do it. I will never ever cut a handle off dead flush, for the main reason that it can come loose, but if it's got a bit of a flare on it, it generally holds it on pretty tight. Plus it's a safety issue to make sure that it doesn't come flying off. So you can, if you have a good close look at that, we'll see if we can get, that has definitely got a nice flare on that. We'll see if we can zoom in on that. I think you can see that's sort of a bit of a wedge shape. So there's no way known that's coming off. So it's just interesting. And I've got many axes and mauls with wooden handles. Most of them don't come loose, but if they do, you either knock the wedge in a little bit more, or you have to take the handle out, saw down the handle a little bit more so the wedge can go in a little bit deeper, reshape the bottom, make it a tighter fit, and refit the handle. But as I said with these cyclone type axes, when you go to buy the handle is about $32, and you buy a brand new one of these, they're about $72. So you're spending about 40% on a handle. So yeah, where possible, I try and save the handle. But I'm not happy about handles coming loose because manufacturers can do a better job. The handles they put in them are actually excellent hardwood. It's called spotted gum, comes from up in Queensland, Australia. So beautiful timber, but unfortunately they're not taking the time to dry it out properly. And if they make sure that they shape the wood so it's a really tight fit and they press a handle on and it's tight, and most of the moisture content has been removed so that it only retains no more than 10% moisture, you'll find that that axe handle won't come loose because of wood shrinkage. I hope that information helps, because there's nothing worse than paying good money for a decent axe for it only to come loose with very little usage. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.